Hello everyone. For this lesson, we will first need to construct a rectangle. A rectangle has two pairs of parallel lines, making an enclosed shape whose interior angles all equal 90 degrees. As we make our rectangle, I hope that it will prove itself to be a rectangle as we go. So in order to do that, we need to first construct a horizontally oriented ray using the straight edge tool. Hold down the button, scroll over to the line with two arrows on each end. To create your horizontally oriented line, place 2 points horizontally. Try to make it big, it's easier to see bigger objects. Also, you'll want your line to be further up the top of the screen. To begin making our rectangle, we will construct a ray perpendicular to the line we just made, which will, by the nature of perpendicular intersections, create our first 90-degree angle. So we need to highlight 1 point and the line. So to do that, you need to use your arrow tool. So highlight 1 point and the line. Go to the Construct menu, scroll down to Perpendicular Line, and we've created our first perpendicular line. Alright, now we will create our first pair of parallel lines. To do that, we need to highlight the other point and the line we just made. Go to the Construct menu, construct parallel line. So now we've created our first set of parallel lines. We've also created another set of perpendicular lines, giving us our second 90-degree angle. To complete the rectangle, we will create our last line, which should be parallel to the first. To do that, we have to use our point tool, and we have to place the point a couple inches lower than the farthest left point on the perpendicular line, the first one that we had made. Use your arrow tool so that you can select the first line we made, the horizontally oriented line, and the point we just made should also be highlighted. Construct a parallel line. So we've just constructed two parallel lines, creating an enclosed space, which creates a rectangle. Also, we've created 4 perpendicular intersections, which make 90-degree angles everywhere that there's an intersection. We also want to make sure all of our intersections have a point. And now we will want to highlight all of the rays that we had previously made. So that will be selecting the dotted lines. And Control H will hide those, leaving us with a rectangle. Also, if we highlight all of the points, we can label them with Control K and measure angles K, J, and N using the Measure tool, highlighting them in that order so that we are measuring angle KJM. It's 90 degrees. Because we made all of our lines in the same way, they shall be 90 degrees. As well, we can test the lengths by highlighting the segments opposite each other. If they are the same, we should be able to measure them at the same time, which they are. And the same goes for the other set of parallel lines. And they're also the same. So we've successfully made a rectangle. Okay, now we will construct a quadrilateral from the midpoints of the rectangle by highlighting the segments first, then using the Control M shortcut that gives us all of our midpoints, and the Control L shortcut that gives us all of our segments. Using the arrow tool, deselect everything and select the points that we just made the midpoints of the rectangle so that we can label them using Control K. Now we can hide the rectangle by selecting all of the points and lines that created it. Make sure you don't highlight anything that's creating the quadrilateral we just made. Control H will hide those. Now we have a shape that looks like a rhombus. And to prove that it's a rhombus, we need to prove first that it is equilateral. If that's so, we should be able to highlight all of the segments and measure them at the same time, which we can. They're all 5.77 centimeters on my picture. A rhombus should also have two sets of congruent opposite angles. So that means that angle QNO, let's highlight those, measure them, should be congruent to the angle QPO. Let's measure those. They are congruent. As well, NOP, angle NOP, should be congruent to angle NQP. And it is. Lastly, the diagonals of a rhombus should bisect the opposite angles and intersect perpendicularly. So to test that, we will use our straight edge tool, and we will go back to the line segment tool. To create our first diagonal, we'll start at point O and take it down to point Q. And the second diagonal will start at point N and end at point P. So they are definitely intersecting the opposite angle. And if they are a 90 degree, if the angles are 90 degrees created by the intersection of the two diagonals, that will prove that it's perpendicular. It looks pretty obviously perpendicular, but if we place a point at the intersection, then we can figure out what the measure of the angle is by selecting first O, the intersection point that we just made, and then P. We can measure that angle. It should be 90 degrees, and it is. So we have successfully made a rhombus from the midpoints of a rectangle. Also, notice that the qualities of a rhombus are the opposite those of a rectangle. So in a rectangle you have 4 congruent angles and 2 pairs of equal and parallel lines. In a rhombus you have 2 sets of congruent angles and 4 equal lines. So that's just an interesting note. Alright, well that's our lesson.